War of the Worlds 2025 is an amazing movie. Ice Cube's performance is hilarious. I could not replicate this man's underwhelming reactions to everything if I tried. But what I also find hilarious is the details. Oh my god, the details. Pause the movie literally anywhere where you can see Ice Cube's computer and there is probably something wrong there. Coordinates that are supposed to be in major US cities that are actually just in the middle of the ocean, IP addresses that are from the completely wrong parts of the country, nonsensical command line text, timestamps that don't update, and so much more. I genuinely have been having a blast combing through this stuff and seeing how wrong it all is. And the crazy thing is, it's not just wrong. Oh no. It's wrong in such a weird way where I'm just baffled at how this could have happened. First thing I want to look at is this. Not only is it a list of coordinates, but it's a whole spreadsheet. Keeping track of such stupid data. For context, this is just supposed to be a fancy report Ice Cube has made for some big government higher-ups. They definitely didn't expect anyone watching the movie to actually sit down and read this because it's so dumb and I love it. The coordinates here are completely wrong, but I want to come back to that because it's kind of hilarious the weirdly specific way they're wrong. But the distance traveled column here is also just straight up wrong, and I'll go more into detail on that later. But I also love the lack of significant digits. Like, for a fancy government report from the guy who has access to all the government spy shit with insanely precise knowledge on everything, you would imagine that the distances would be something like, I don't know, 12.67 or 93.0643 miles or something, but nah. They don't have enough precision or confidence to give the distance traveled in less than single mile increments. The lack of significant digits implies that the positions could be off by like an entire mile, while their coordinates are so ridiculously precise, going to 6 decimal places that is so precise, you are getting to centimeters level of precision. This is the level of precision they use to see by how many inches a piece of land moved after an earthquake. And you go from that level of precision to, oh, I don't know, could be off by like a mile. Like, what? Also, in the city/state column, they will just randomly choose to include or not USA at the end. Although, I have a theory for why they did that, so just sit tight for that. I also wanted to just mention the dumpster fire that is Adams Country, Colorado. That's a typo, that should say Adams County. There's also a random period in the middle of the latitude number, so on top of the coordinates being completely wrong, this one is just extra fucked up. That's awesome. The average speed column is actually fine, but then you got the estimated size column. If you look at the movie, all the alien thingies use the exact 3D model, which I've heard is a default asset from some film production software, by the way, which would be really funny if true. But since they all use the exact same model, how do these things vary in size, which I assume actually means height here? Because size is just such a vague description, I'm pretty sure they mean height. These things apparently vary in height between 29 and 47 meters for some reason. Why would mass-produced alien robots vary in height so slightly and not all just be the same? I couldn't tell you. The weird thing too is that as opposed to everything else in this document, which was probably made by someone who didn't give a shit and just threw something together to look vaguely professional and fancy, the estimated weight actually makes sense. That is the correct amount of significant digits for an estimation like this. The relationship between the height and weight also weirdly makes sense. With a little bit of wiggle room, each meter of height on these alien robots seem to weigh about 2.5 tons. And that 2.5 tons per meter ratio stays weirdly consistent across the whole spreadsheet. I genuinely could not tell you if that was intentional and someone actually gave a shit about giving the robots accurate stats, or if this was some coincidence. And I find that so weird and interesting. Like, how did this get made? I would love to know. In this one column, you have somebody who figured out a meter to ton ratio, and everything else is just complete bullshit. Like, what the hell? We also got the completely redundant column of locomotion, which is all just bipedal walk. I don't know why you would even make this. They're all copies of the same kind of robot. Why the fuck would any of them locomote differently? Like, same with the energy source. Why would you bother making a whole column for information you don't know? Who made this? And intelligence? Likely advanced? What does that even mean? Is there some kind of test you do to see if they're advanced or not? Do they sit down one of these machines for a psych evaluation to figure out if they have advanced intelligence or just medium intelligence? What do you mean? And of course the next 3 columns are also completely redundant, so that's cool. So yeah, this spreadsheet made for a government report to help save the world from an alien invasion barely has any useful information in it. And where it does, the information is usually just straight up wrong. And when you have the weirdly sensibly put together weight column in a sea of doggy doo-doo, do you see what I mean by these details being so wrong in such a weirdly fascinating way? Like, how did this happen? Okay, now let's do a deep dive into the coordinates. Now, if you look here, you first got the impact site coordinates and then the current position coordinates. You would assume that the distance traveled column refers to the distance between these 2 points, but it does not. I'm pretty sure they just randomly filled the distance traveled column with whatever. I calculated the actual distances, and here they are. Again, it's weird how the true distances traveled do make sense in the context of the movie. Someone had to know enough about coordinates to be able to do this. They knew enough about coordinates to slightly modify them to get a realistic change in distance, but they didn't care enough to put the actual values into the distance traveled column for some reason. This shit is so weird. But what's even weirder is where the coordinates actually go if you check. We're immediately off to a great start for Memphis, Tennessee, where the coordinates take you to literally the middle of the desert, in this border region between Afghanistan and Pakistan. They got the wrong hemisphere of the globe, bro. Let me explain why this is so weird. Here's a quick lesson in reading coordinates. The first number is latitude. That's how north or south you are. -90 is the South Pole, 0 is the equator, and +90 is the North Pole. So at least all the coordinates are positive, meaning they're in the northern hemisphere where the US is, except Atlanta, Georgia, what the fuck? The second number is longitude, which is how east or west you are. Coordinates in the western hemisphere, where America firmly sits, are negative, which makes sense for all the coordinates except for Memphis, Tennessee. So, you know what? Maybe they just made a typo and forgot the negative sign, and if we add it back, we'll get correct coordinates. Oh wait, never mind, now it's in the middle of the ocean. The weird thing is, the latitude number is close-ish to Tennessee. It's like somebody made a vague guess to where Tennessee probably is in the coordinates, which would require some knowledge about how coordinates work. It's so weird, man. So with that, you would think that whoever put this together just randomly generated coordinate numbers or something to fill the spreadsheet. But the 2 Colorado entries completely prove that wrong. For some reason, they are both completely accurate. And the only thing wrong here is that they made a typo when spelling Adams County. But the coordinates themselves are completely sensible. They both are located exactly where they say they are. And the cool thing, you can see that both robots end up meeting up in this area right here, which makes sense in the plot of the movie because I'm pretty sure there's data centers over here. This one completely baffles me. Memphis, Tennessee's coordinates were a dumpster fire, and obviously had zero thought put into them, but these ones, someone actually spent the time to not only get accurate coordinates, but also create this super cool detail that you would only know if you check the coordinates yourself like some freak. And these robots decided to meet up at this spot. There's an alien robot love story written in the coordinates of a background spreadsheet of War of the Worlds, and yet everything else is an incomprehensible shit show. How? How does this happen? Somebody tell me, please! Next we got Glassmaker, Maryland. Now, I will show you where these points are in relation to the actual Glassmaker, Maryland, but the crazy thing is, Glassmaker, Maryland does not exist. I checked every municipality and county name in Maryland. Glassmaker does not exist. However, if you check where the first coordinate is, not only is it in Maryland, but it's right next to a neighborhood named not Glassmaker, but Glass Manor. I'm actually going to lose my fucking mind. What is this? And the crazy thing, this robot actually starts heading into Washington, D.C., specifically towards what I'm pretty sure are some data centers. I'm also pretty sure that this is the exact robot we see later in the film. I am fucking flabbergasted, bro. Some of these coordinates have so little thought in them, they go to fucking Afghanistan, while others correspond to actual robots we see later in the film. Again, I have to ask, how? So I guess when they were typing this out, they made a typo, and instead of typing in Glass Manor, maybe it just autocorrected to Glass Maker? That's my best explanation. Livingston, New York is the only set of coordinates where they're wrong for a reason that actually makes sense. They don't go to Livingston, New York, they go to Livingston, New Jersey. They must have made a typo here by typing NY instead of NJ. Apart from that, this one's completely accurate and makes complete sense. A thing of note here though, is that these are by far the closest coordinates, meaning that whatever robot was here was just chilling in some random suburb of New Jersey, barely moving. Very epic, very cool. And finally, we have Atlanta, Georgia. Oh, Atlanta, Georgia. Just look at these fuck-ass coordinates for a second. Do you remember my epic coordinates reading lesson? Do you see the negative first number? That means that this is way south of the equator, not even remotely close to the States. So, okay, I guess it's just another randomly generated coordinate, I guess. Where is this? Middle of the ocean somewhere? Nope! It goes to some random field right outside of Cape Town, South Africa, but that's the wrong hemisphere in both latitude and longitude! Bro! Okay, but it's a negative latitude. Surely this is just another typo, and that negative isn't supposed to be there. So let's get rid of it and see where it goes. No! Depending on which negatives we fix, we either end up in the middle of the Mediterranean or the middle of the Atlantic. How does this happen? Coordinates like these that are just random wouldn't make sense. That would mean they just randomly generated coordinates, but they didn't! Some of these coordinates were put together with such care that not only are they precise and accurate, but together they tell a story about different robots helping each other between coordinates while others are on the wrong side of the planet. I swear to God, I feel like I'm getting punked. This is a psyop by Biggie Ice to fuck with me specifically. He knew I'd be looking at these coordinates. He knew it would drive me crazy. I know what you're doing, Ice Cube. This isn't over. You fucked with me for the last time. Oh yeah, I forgot to explain why some entries include the country USA text while others just have the city and state name. If you look at the spreadsheet, the two coordinates that are completely wrong do not include the USA text, but the other four that actually make sense for the most part do include USA. So my theory for why that's the case is that the middle four spreadsheet rows were made by one guy who actually kind of gave a shit about the coordinates and the data, while the other two were made by someone else later who didn't give a fuck and just wanted to pad out the spreadsheet, and so just generated random coordinates, and because this second guy didn't give a fuck, also formatted the city/state name column inconsistently. That is my game theory. That's all I have to say about the spreadsheet, which is what this video was mostly about, but there were a few other miscellaneous oddities that I want to point out because I thought they were similarly weird. First is this attack report map UI. The log time here does not change, even though it appears at several points in the movie where it very much is at a completely different time of day. It's always 9:30 at every point in the movie where you can see it for some reason. The projection is also just baffling. In case you don't know, a map projection is the way you choose to represent the surface of a 3D sphere on a 2D grid. This map obviously uses some variation of the Mercator projection, which is pretty standard, and I'm sure you've all seen this projection many times. It's the most common projection. I just don't know why they'd bother to even put a field for something as niche and irrelevant as the projection being used without even putting something relevant in there. There are several standard ways of denoting which projection you're using, and these random numbers don't follow any projection denotation standard. They genuinely just put random numbers there. There's also this X and Y field up here, which just straight up go unused. They also establish in the movie that the robots are after data centers, but that makes zero sense with the map of attacks they have here. Not only is it implied that there definitely should be more red dots, the areas they're placed in make zero sense. Like, half of these are in areas where basically nobody lives, and there wouldn't be anything even resembling a data center for thousands of kilometers. You also got this bit here where a robot which is supposed to be in France instead appears to be, I don't know, somewhere in the Middle East from the looks of it. Rainbolt would probably know the exact fucking street address of this place though. And then you got this random coordinate that pops up. I don't think I have to tell you, this coordinate also makes zero sense. It's supposed to be in Nevada, but it's, again, not even in the right hemisphere. And even if we corrected it, it still goes in the middle of the ocean. So, you know, that's cool. And lastly, this is one of many screens where IP addresses are shown. This goes without saying, but these are all wrong. This first one is supposed to go to Camp Pendleton in California, but it actually goes to Grand Valley State University. This one is supposed to go to a Navy base in Nevada, but actually goes to Dallas, Texas. This one is supposed to go to Kuwait, but actually goes to Beijing, China.
What's that, Beijing?
This one is supposed to go to Saudi Arabia, but actually goes to also Beijing, China. This one is supposed to go to Germany, but actually goes to Yokoshima, Japan. And finally, this one is supposed to go to Pearl Harbor, but actually goes to Dallas, Texas again. Fuck, you see, this is exactly what I mean. It's wrong, but in such a weird way. All the IP addresses are wrong, but the ones that are supposed to be in the US are in the US. And all the ones outside of the country are outside of the country. It's like whoever made this knew enough about IP addresses to know whether or not an IP address was in the US or not, but not enough to simply look up what an IP address in each location would start with. It's so weird. There are a lot more details just like this in the movie, but I'm not going to keep going on and on about it because it's all just more of the same, really. Just more and more details that are wrong in a really strange and bizarre way. So yeah, those are all the really weirdly incorrect details in War of the Worlds. Again, how the fuck was this made? I don't know. Like this had to be done with some level of intentionality. Like, you don't just, nobody is wrong like this randomly. Like, there's something going on here where, like, it's almost like they were intentionally wrong. I don't know. I don't know. And by the way, if you haven't seen this movie yet, I seriously recommend watching it. This is genuinely a once-in-a-generation kind of bad movie. It is terrible, but in some of the funniest ways possible, especially with friends. I did, and I was laughing my ass off half the time. The movie was an hour and a half long, but we probably added an extra hour to that just with how much we'd pause to point out some bullshit detail that was wrong in the goofiest way. Kinda like this. Anyway, thanks for watching, bye!